In terms of what's happening in AI, let me take a step back and say people tend to compare this wave to, the internet or other waves of computing, but I think this is the biggest wave of all, and I'll tell you why. For the very first time in the history of computing, computers are not executing what we program. That's a mental sea change to think about. The other is that for the very first time, they're processing in parallel rather than serially on a wide scale, as noticed by the sales and the amazing market cap of NVIDIA today, which sort of typifies this movement to parallel processing. And yeah, I view it as kind of the change of moving the world from structured to unstructured data on a big scale. So it's a big thought. I think in terms of generative AI, there's three really sea change principles that I see. One of them is that it used to be that the computers did the QA. We created and the computers did the QA, and now we do, they create and we do the QA. And it used to be that we had a program in their language, and now they basically will take programming in ours. And they're able to do applications beyond any applications that humans have been able to do, as was talked about by some of your previous speakers. And we can get into some of those if you'd like.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm curious how you see the role of MIT playing as this, AI moment unfolds. The term AI was coined by McCarthy and Minsky when they were at MIT. I talked to Marvin, who was a neighbor of mine, and he said, "Yeah, I used the word AI because I thought the military would want to fund it. The concept was going on before that, but AI got really coined in 1955. But as we think about the next, few decades, what role do you see MIT playing going forward?"
Well, MIT has, I think of MIT as three legs of the stool for basically everything. One of them is teaching, one is research, and one is innovation, commercialization. All three are happening at MIT right now. I mean, clearly, machine learning classes are probably some of the most popular ever in the history of the school, both in class and online. In terms of research, I mean, we're obviously moving the envelope in the next generation of areas, like everything from synthetic data to multimodal to agents, as we've seen, to, I assume earlier today, Daniela, you talked about liquid AI, about the ideas of moving beyond transformers, which I think is going to be the real sea change for what's happening in generative AI. And then, of course, I sat in on a talk last week on what's happening in quantum. And Daniela, I think your newest book is on robotics. So
there's also one in AI coming out in August.
I'm waiting for that one. So clearly, all of these are happening at MIT at the same time in terms of research and also in terms of commercialization, because there's going to be a ton of AI companies that pump out of MIT. The other thing I'll say is that MIT is a really interesting place in that everything is kind of bottom up. So, CSAIL is a huge force. It's now 61 years old, but I think there's 25 AI centers that I've seen around MIT today with the idea of creating bilinguals, people who understand their discipline and they understand machine learning. And it also goes into ethics, new labs like CERC about responsibility, or labs like Quest for Intelligence that's blending the work of brain and cognitive sciences with AI. So I think those are other areas where MIT is just pushing the envelope.
Mark, you're such a visionary. And so with your futuristic visionary hat on, what are your boldest aspirations for AI for the future?
Well, if you look at, I would argue that where AI has gone is from optimizing the life of the individual to optimizing the life of the enterprise, which is really the last decade. And And this is the decade of optimizing for a better world. So we're already seeing where science has moved from being discovered to designed by use of AI and large language models. I mean, instead of just large language models, now we have protein language models where, for example, we can put the next protein in a sequence and create a molecule, design it, and then allow humans to do wet lab experiments to be able to verify it. So I believe that what we're going to see is diseases treated much earlier and even eradicated. I think we're going to see personalized treatments. You'll walk into a doctor's office and they'll be able to tell you very specifically by using large language models what the treatment is just for you. I think AI is going to enhance environmental protection. I think AI is going to be the cornerstone, and MIT is going to combine it with its climate initiatives to have AI native materials created, processes created for being able to handle climate change and carbon sequestration. I think that we're going to find sophisticated ways to prevent disasters and be able to predict them better. We'll be able to improve our food production, improve worldwide welfare, and frankly, also fairness and improve social welfare. I mean, people talk about AI as biased, but I think humans are far more biased than AIs are going to be.
Well, and also, as we understand the bias problem in AI, we can provide technical solutions to fix the bias, to rebalance how AI is trained. And so I'm very optimistic about the work, I'm answering a little bit John's question. I'm very optimistic about how MIT can play a role in making technological contributions to improving AI as a whole.
So in closing, I have a three-part question. One, as the chair, you're on a committee, you've mentioned it to me, like Ivy Plus committee, where you meet with the other chairs of the Ivy League and some other schools. I'm curious, what's your feeling on how they are dealing with AI? I do think the business model of higher ed, when everyone can be an expert because they have access to these AIs, is going to change. And yet we need people to ask good questions and know how to interact with AI more than ever. And so that's going to put a premium on what top schools can deliver, but it's going to be done differently. I'm just curious, as someone who has a seat at the table with David Rubenstein and others, what are you seeing when you talk to the other chairs? And then second question, what's after large language models from where you sit? And then lastly, this is the third Imagination Action you've been part of. You came to the one in Davos, you were on the board, you were on a panel in April. Do you think this plays a role in helping to facilitate some of the innovation between startups and researchers and commercialization for the MIT community? So 3 questions.
Okay, let me see if I can balance them in my head and remember them. So the first thing, what's happening at other Ivy League schools? I think people are actually looking to MIT for leadership. And obviously everybody's in a race to provide the best AI educational research and commercialization they can. But the reason why I say that is because we really created a new concept around the start of the Schwarzman College of Computing. This idea that you could have a central school, and CSAIL obviously is the largest entity in the college, that you could have a central school that could provide a bridge to all the other disciplines and basically turn everyone into an AI expert working on their discipline. I think other schools are now starting to copy that model. I think it was really way ahead of its time and will prove out to be very prescient. So that's one in terms of areas. In terms of Davos.
What's after large language models? And then finally, what do you think of Imagination Action?
Models, well, if you look at what's been written up by people like Suleiman, we're moving from generative AI, which I guess is the way of talking about large language models, to interactive AI, which are really agents. that are moving around. But then on the other side of that is what's beyond large language models is new technologies, since they're also cornerstone in transformers, and we just talked about that. And I know Daniela's lab has been working very hard on a next generation that lowers tremendously the amount of compute and energy we need for both training and for inference, and also to make them available for interactive applications. So I think we're going to see both of those. And then in terms of what's happening with areas like Davos, yeah, I think we're going to need to harmonize regulation. I think you're going to see regulation in two forms. One is going to be technology that pushes the envelope, that puts things like guardrails in place, but the other will be government-oriented regulations that will come together between companies, governments. I think governments, will also be able to start to provide compute. I know this is a project that Daniela is working hard on for MIT, which is, all of us need more compute to be able to push the envelope on research and do research on responsible models. And so being at the forefront to bring these groups together and be able to make compute more plentiful than in just a few industry companies will be very important. Harmonizing data standards between companies and groups will be very important. Privacy, I think all of these will be wrapped up in a combination of governments, industry, and also researchers.
Great. Well, thank you for making time in your schedule to pop in, and thank you for being flexible. Will.i.am had a lot to say, and I'm glad you got to hear it. We're going to go on to our next live speaker, but 5 stars if you were an Uber driver.
Thank you so much, Mark. Looking forward to seeing you soon.